we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. Sweep, 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 sweep. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. Sweep, 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 sweep. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. Sweep, 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 much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy. Nope.
Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 sweep. as much fun as they are. Well, sleeping can be fun too. Sleep, 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 sleep. Sleep, 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 sleep. Only Twilight could. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sleeping can be fun too. Sleep, 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 sleep. Sleep, 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 sleep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sleeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sleeping can be fun too. Sleep, 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 sleep. Sleep, 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 sleep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sleep, 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 sleep. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sleeping can be fun too. Sleep, 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 sleep. Sleep, 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 sleep.
Nong.
I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 sweep. Fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean... I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 sweep. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 En taju, miksi ihmisjengi pistää suone ja miksi on levinnyt tänne I wish we were having. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope. Sweep, 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 sweep.
dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too.
Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance sweeping can be fun too.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
God hates Australia.
Somewhere someone's got it worse. Wish that made it easier. Wish I didn't do the hurt. Small as my hand.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too.
Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
God hates Australia.
Somewhere someone's got it worse. Wish I made it easier. Wish I didn't do the hurt. Small as my hand. Somewhere someone's got it worse. We've done made it easier. We start feeling through the hurt. Small as my hand.
fun as they are.
Well, sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
As to how exactly rainbows are made in Equestria. While a great amount of Pegasi ponies are employed at the rainbow department of the weather factory, almost all of them do low-end work. What's known is that the great streams of spectra, the individual colors of the rainbow, flow through large grates and into vast vats. From there, workers carefully and equally mix the spectra into coagulated rainbow pools that mix and run through the factory and surrounding cities. Next, the mixture is pumped into the floor below, where the other employees atomize it and store it until the active weather Pegasi deploy it into field. However, no one knows how individual spectra is made. Supplies are never seen being brought in, leaving not even a single clue as to what goes into a rainbow. Tourists, when visiting the factory, are treated to an extremely foreboding and plain wall, with massive solid doors barring entry to any pony at any time. While most of the facility's various signs and architecture are bubbly and welcoming, the Rainbow Factory's upper floor was protected by harsh imagery of potential hazards and death, and the cloud wall was made not out of the clean white of the rest of the city, but of black, quietly thundering forests. To become an employee of the Upper Rainbow Factory means sacrificing any life outside of those black walls. Workers were sworn to secrecy and forbidden from leaving and live inside the facility itself. Those few who managed to make it out not in a body bag were twisted and disturbed, too damaged to even bring themselves to talk about it. A lot of theories were proposed. Dark magic from captured unicorns, chemicals and environmental hazards that no sane pony would tolerate, and even thoughts of another unknown sister of Celestia's, destined to create spectra instead of raise the sun or moon. None of them could be farther from the truth.
Come on, Orion. We're gonna be late for our final test.
Scootaloo called to a friend of hers. She was older now, in her last year of flight school. She, like all the other Pegasi in the school, were terribly nervous about the final test. Those that passed were granted freedom into the world to find their cutie marks if they hadn't yet, and become worker ponies. A little known, or at least a little thought about fact, was what happened to the fillies that failed their test. While uncommon, one or two from every class generally didn't have it in them to perform the vigorous acts and maneuvers. Those that failed their test were looked down upon in the worst ways, shunned and hated. Cloudsdale was always bred in a form of nationalism among its occupants. If you weren't the best and didn't show the potential of being the greatest, you weren't allowed to be part of the glorious collective. Scootaloo moved a little to the side as Orion, a tall yet fairly skinny pony, settled next to her. He fluffed his light brown feathers and gave a worried attempt at a smile as he stared around where he sat. They were sitting in a large open waiting room overlooking the Coliseum with all the other graduating Pegasi. Just visible in the distance was the factory. Orion glanced at it and gulped.
I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too.
Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I wish we were having as much fun as they are. Well, sweeping can be fun too.
Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep.
Open waiting room overlooking the Coliseum with all.
Come on, Orion.
She was older now and terribly nervous about the final test. Those that passed were granted freedom into the world to find their cutie marks if they hadn't yet and become worker ponies. A little known, or at least a little thought about fact, was what happened to the fillies that failed their test. While uncommon, one or two from every class generally didn't have it in them to perform the vigorous acts and maneuvers. Those that failed their test were looked down upon in the worst ways, shunned and hated. Cloudsdale was always bred in a form of nationalism among its occupants. If you weren't the best and didn't show the potential of being the greatest, you weren't allowed to be part of the glorious collective. Scootaloo moved a little to the side as Orion, a tall yet fairly skinny pony, settled next to her. He fluffed his light brown feathers and gave a worried attempt at a smile as he stared around where he sat. They were sitting in a large open waiting room overlooking the Coliseum with all the other graduating Pegasi. Just visible in the distance was the factory. Orion glanced at it and gulped.
What's the matter, Orion? You afraid of getting a dead-end job on the snow line?
Orion chuckled a bit, then closed his eyes and sighed.
No, I don't know. I don't think I can do this. What if I fail? Okay, what if I don't fail, but do just bad enough that everyone still hates me? I don't know if I can take being deported. Where do we even go anyways?
Scootaloo gave Orion a friendly punch.
No one knows, you dolt. And we're not going to fail. Everyone here is going to be fine. I know I will at least pass. Thanks to the tips from Rainbow Dash, I'm sure to be fine.
Oh, yeah, sure. That reassures me. That's actually just as, if not even more reassuring than the psychopathic hate that every pony here seems to love to spread.
Quit panicking, Scaredy Wings.
Scootaloo replied.
The only one here I think might fail is that yellow pony with the dark green mane. She's the one who was out sick for that month, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Orion remembered as he craned his neck at the other pony's direction.
The one who had that bad case of wolf and wing. She looks pretty confident, though.
I suppose we'll see.
Scootaloo trailed, turning to look at the factory herself. It gave her chills. Not of fear, but pride.
I hope I get some cool active weather job. Can you imagine? Everyone in Ponyville or Philadelphia staring up at me going, "There goes Scootaloo, such an amazing flyer!" And from Cloudsdale, there can be no doubt.
She smiled in excitement, forgetting her tension for the moment.
That would be something, I'll admit. Mind you, just coming from Cloudsdale, who wouldn't be in awe?
Exactly. Praise the flock.
Praise the flock.
Places! Places, every pony!
A massive buff Pegasus walked towards the entrance of the Coliseum.
We're going to do this by name. Your educators are on the east side of the field. Do not, I repeat, do not fly too far west. If they lose sight of you for any reason, you'll be failed immediately. Take deep breaths, stretch your wings one last time. The test will consist of 3 sections: weather clearing, agility, and finally recovery. Clear the clouds, fly through the hoops, and then fly to the marked elevation. Close your wings for at least 3 seconds. Any less and you'll fail. But keep in mind, there's no extra points for extra seconds. Finally, recover before you hit the cloud floor. Understood? Any questions?
The instructor paused and carefully glanced at every single pony in the room. Everyone's eyes were completely focused on him, and none were creased with confusion.
All right. Aurora Dawn, you're up first. Clear, fly, fall, complete.
A yellow pony nodded and walked quickly up the starting ramp with purpose. She stared at the watching judges, waiting for a nod from all three, and then took off with powerful force. The ramp bounced slightly from the force of the takeoff. Every pony watched as Aurora quickly reached the starting altitude and then began the direct and purposeful attack on the positioned clouds. With expert timing and intelligent angles, the sky was soon empty of any moisture. Scootaloo and Orion watched with open mouths as they watched the first testee pull fast and tight turns, expertly shooting dead center through each and every hoop. Finally, Aurora pulled herself up with proper altitude, hovered, and closed her wings. The group gasped as she started plummeting down towards the clouds and counted breathlessly. 1, 2, 3. They sighed as they watched her wings open at the correct amount of time, correctively holding that relief. Suddenly, Aurora's wings whipped forward, and the group of students flinched in horror as they heard a loud, hollow snap, only to be suddenly replaced by an unending, piercing scream. Many, like Orion, shielded their eyes with their wings, as others, like Scootaloo, could only watch, terrified, as the blur of yellow, green, and red plummeted into the cloud with a dull thud. Wasting no time, the instructor walked forwards again, as the three judges simply pointed down and started shuffling papers around. Speaking loudly, as if nothing had happened, he called out again.
Daisy Fields, clear, fly, fall, complete.
Scootaloo and Orion stared slack-jawed, as the other pony gulped, then walked forward onto the path and took off. They turned back to the tuff on the cloud, where Aurora had landed and stared. As the wind blew the fragments that were thrown up from the collision away, they saw a shivering yellow body attempting to move, only to collapse with a cry.
Faraday spots, clear, fly, fall, complete.
Aurora still struggled to walk, wailing with every step. Her legs weren't broken. She could still use them fine, but it was obvious the pain from her wing joints and the loss of her potential life was crushing her. Scootaloo felt Orion shuffle uneasily, tears welling in his eyes as a frown formed on his face.
Holiday shine, clear, fly, fall, complete.
No one's coming to help her.
Orion seethed through closed teeth. Scootaloo felt extremely sad for the yellow Pegasus, but couldn't see herself helping her. She would be failed herself and sent away, far away from Cloudsdale and any familiar place on Equestria, to a place where she or any other failed students could never stain Cloudsdale's reputation. It was a terrible shame, but Scootaloo couldn't fail herself. She couldn't fail her friends, and she definitely couldn't fail Rainbow Dash. Not after the care and the help she had given Scootaloo's whole life. Scootaloo blinked the tears from her eyes and forced herself to watch the completing students. One after another took off, successfully passed the test, and flew to the east gate under the judges' spots in the stands. That's all Scootaloo focused on. Pass the test, fly to the gate, live a happy life.
Orion Solstice, clear, fly, fall, complete.
No.
What? You can't just refuse your flight test. Get out there before you piss the judges off.
No! Don't even pretend to care about my future if you don't care about hers. You say you want me to get a good life, and yet you let those that fail suffer unbearable pain.
Get the fuck onto that field before I fail you myself!
Fine.
Orion spoke sharply before walking onto the ramp. He stared at the judges, waiting for the individual nods, and the second they came, he took off. However, long before the starting altitude, He turned sharply and landed gently next to Aurora. She turned and looked at him, blood running down her forehead and sides, the tears streaming down her face.
What are you doing? You'll fail like me. You'll be exiled.
Huh. I'd rather be exiled from a place that treats ponies like this, rather than live my whole life while others don't live theirs.
Aurora smiled, happiness briefly replacing her sadness and her blackened, puffy eyes, until she stumbled again, and intense pain flashed across her body. Orion leaned in close, using his wing to brace the yellow pony against himself. He stared up at the judges, beaming hate in his vision. They stared down, unaffected, and simply pointed down, before looking back towards the ramp for the next contestant. Scootaloo stood shocked, hardly hearing her name called. Blackened, puffy eyes. She moved numbly up the ramp, never taking her eyes off of her friend, and the pony he sacrificed himself for to help. After a brief moment, she shook her head, recovered her thoughts, and looked at the judges. Thoughts passed through her head as she watched them all nod.
Oh, great. What do I do? I can't let everyone I know down, but I'll never see Orion again. I hope he knew that risk when he did that. I'm sure he's thinking the same right now.
She glanced at Orion. He wasn't looking at her. Instinct kicked in, as the familiar rush of wind cooled her and blew her thoughts away. She stopped at the right altitude and then launched again, sensing and seeing every cloud, formulating a game plan. In the matter of a couple dozen seconds, the sky was clear. She did a quick loop in midair, aiming for the first hoop. With a powerful flash of her wings, she propelled herself forward to the first ring, and the second one, and the third one, expertly turning and drifting. She curved in towards the second last ring, near the bottom of the field. As she descended, she caught sight of Orion and Aurora, almost at the west gate now. Orion turned his head and smiled weakly. Scootaloo's focus shattered. Orion knew what he did. He cared about her, he'd miss her, and he'd never get to say goodbye. Scootaloo cranked into the lower part of the ring, falling backward several feet and hitting the ground. With a sudden, intense flash of fear, she flipped herself onto her feet and began flapping her wings, elevating off the ground.
Maybe that didn't count as a failure. I can still fly.
She spun around at the judges. 3 hooves pointed down. Scootaloo started crying there, tears welling up and blurring her vision. This wasn't right. This shouldn't have happened. None of it. Orion should have passed his test and cheered her on from the east gate. She shouldn't have looked at him. She should have just focused on flying. But there was no room for excuses. Defeated, she slowly hovered towards Orion and settled down next to him. She looked at him through her purple eyes. He looked back, offering a smile.
You did a good job.
Scootaloo dropped her head and sobbed. She then walked around Orion, lifted a wing of her own, and helped Aurora walk to the west gate. Before them stood a long, unlit hall, with only a cheap sign stuck to the wall, notifying test failees to proceed down the hall. They waited, only briefly, to gather themselves and prepare for where they would be taken, and then all stepped forward together.
Xem video không gián đoạn với YouTube Premium và đắm chìm trong những nội dung.
Against an empty carriage at the end of the lonely hall were 3 imposing ponies, leaning in a disinterested and bored pose. One of them happened to look up as the sorry-looking trio stumbled out into the open. They were on the bottom edge of the Colosseum, with the vast rolling hills and plains of Equestria visible far below.
Hey, boss, we got some damn worthless Pegasus.
The first one called to an even bigger pony on the other side of the carriage.
I suppose it's get-to-work time, is it?
Cool it, hot shot. There may be more, too.
No. I was the last student to go.
Scootaloo spoke in sobs. Orion could only hang his head.
It's...
She paused, and then breathed deeply, determined to remain as strong as she could.
It's just us three. Aurora's wings, they're broken.
Ain't that just a crying shame it is? What's it to us? Oh, the better she don't come flying back to us no more.
We may have failed our damn test, but that doesn't mean we're not worth keeping alive!
Scootaloo shouted in a flash of rage. She was determined to hold on to as much dignity as she could.
All right, sheesh. Hey, Patches, doctor her up before we head out. I don't want any blood on them seats, I just washed that thing. You other two? In the cart.
Orion and Scootaloo hopped into the carriage and got as comfortable as they could on the hard seats, but made sure to leave room for Aurora. As soon as the third of the large ponies finished bandaging her wing, Aurora carefully stepped into the vehicle and laid down on the bench on the back. Scootaloo inched closer to her and leaned down to talk as the door to the carriage slammed shut. The boss pony was inside the back, standing by the door, watching each of them.
So,
Scootaloo began quietly, trying not to speak too loud.
you're Aurora? I'm Scootaloo. I'm sorry we had to meet like this.
Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting.
Aurora spoke gently, with sincerity in her eyes.
We did our best. That's all we can say. That's all any of us can say. Who's to say that the city of the deported isn't a good one anyways?
The thought struck Scootaloo as she considered it. No pony was told where the Pegasi were brought. Most ponies considered it to be some odd land, like where the zebras hailed from, and made Scootaloo realize something even more profound.
Hey, if where we're taken is where Zipporah is from, then there's gotta be a way to get back. It's not as if we're banned from Equestria. Fluttershy, an old friend of mine, she's a Pegasus who lives in Ponyville. She never passed flight school. She never even took her test. They've never come and taken her away.
Exactly.
Aurora agreed with a nod. Orion overheard and offered his thoughts.
I think the reason we're sent so far away is because no pony from Cloudsdale ever wants to admit that someone who failed the flight school could come from their city. What a fucking horrible place, now that I think about it. I never want to go back.
Maybe that's why no Pegasus ever comes back. They just don't like Cloudsdale.
You goddamn worthless ponies can hardly call yourself Pegasus.
Boss spoke from the door. He was swaying ever so slightly as the carriage was lifted and moved to an unknown location.
Useless failures is what you are. No pony comes back from exile, regardless of reason. Can't even pass your goddamn test. You three make me sick.
Scootaloo jumped up from her seat, lifted herself into the air with her wings, and dove legs first at Boss.
You shut the hell up about us!
Boss raised his hoof and backhanded Scootaloo out of the air, onto the floor.
I can treat you however I want. You hardly classify as ponies to Cloudsdale, or any of Equestria for that matter. Now sit the fuck down and shut up until you get to your destination.
Where are we being taken anyways? It's not like we can tell anyone now. And I'm sure it's the delivery guys. You should know.
Hell if I know. We hand this carriage off to ponies in suits and we get a bag full of coins to keep quiet about the whole thing. That's how it's always been, for 1,000 years.
The three fillies huddled together, scared of the unknown. They kept quiet as they waded through the unbearable trip, all lost in their own thoughts. Friends, family, loved ones, and pets. All will never see them again, and some would never find out why. An hour passed, and then another. Finally, the uncomfortable quiet was broken by the sudden lurch of the carriage stopping in its flight.
Ah. Well, there's my stop. You ponies play nice now. Have fun in wherever the hell you're sent to.
The carriage door shuffled open, and Boss hopped out with a gust of cold wind. It was night outside now, with hardly any light to be seen at all. Scootaloo stared outside and noticed another figure staring in. It was dressed in all black. Its tail dyed an unnatural black that never occurred in nature. Its face was covered in a black, loose-fitting mask, concealing its mane. All that was visible were rose-colored eyes, staring indifferently at the 3 ponies inside. They stopped on Scootaloo momentarily, unrecognizing, but she stared back. A second passed. The dark pony slammed the door shut, and the carriage took off once again.
At least we can talk now.
Aurora whispered in the dark, but they had nothing to talk about. The carriage finally stuttered to a stop. The 3 desolate foals blinked their eyes awake, having all resolved to conserve energy for whatever came next. With a loud scraping noise, the door shook, and then swung wide open. Several more ponies, obscured by masks and suits, were moving around the area. Scootaloo blinked against the light from what she was seeing. They were in a cloud building. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed more details. Several of the blackened ponies were rushing around, some holding clipboards, some carrying briefcases and other important-looking items on their backs. The complex was full of machinery and signs. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and a loud humming ran in the background, occasionally joined by other industrial sounds, such as crashes or alarms. Scootaloo gasped.
This place! The architecture, it's all so familiar. I think we're in the weather factory.
Orion frowned.
That can't be right. We were traveling for way too long. We've got to be far away from Equestria now, not to mention the city.
Actually, Scootaloo may be right. I noticed it was maybe the same amount of time from when we left the Coliseum to the place the carriage driver swapped, that it was from the swap place to here. But I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe that's just a coincidence.
Welcome, Muse.
A large and powerful voice commanded. Several of the suited ponies moved to make way for the deep, dark red Pegasus, dressed in a white lab coat.
You degenerates are probably wondering where exactly you are. Stupid fillies, you're in Cloudsdale! The Rainbow facility, to be correct. Allow me to show you around.
What's going on here? Do you expect to use us as slaves? Because I'd rather be deported.
Scootaloo yelled. Orion and Aurora got off their seats and stood behind Scootaloo, nodding in agreement.
Like you failures have a choice. You'll be here for the rest of your lives. I'm sorry. Where are my manners? I am Dr. Atmosphere. My degree isn't a medical one. I shall reassure you in case you're picturing some dreadful surgery going on behind the scenes. Strange how so many worthless Pegasus get that idea. No, my degree is in engineering. I'm one of the 4 colts in this facility. I'm sure you've all had the tour of the lower factory, no?
The 3 ponies slowly nodded, unsure what was going on.
Excellent. Who can tell me where the tour begins?
Orion spoke up first.
Where the spectra comes from upstairs and is mixed.
Very good. What a pity you're utterly useless to the flock. You could have been a smart one.
Dr. Atmosphere smiled sadistically and patted Orion on the head.
But today we're on the upper floor. Please follow me. And don't get too far behind, or one of my helpers will be forced to encourage you.
With that, he winked at the suited ponies. With nods, 3 of them at the rear leaned forward and jabbed each of the Pegasus with tasers, shocking them to the ground. Dr. Atmosphere whinnied in laughter as they all yelped and fell, and continued with a soft chuckle as they all stood up again. Scootaloo blinked more tears from her eyes and stood herself up again, trying to lose the tingling in her nerves. She turned and quickly looked at each of the suited ponies, catching each one of them in the eye when she could. None of them were the rose-eyed pony from the carriage. Begrudgingly, she started walking behind the red engineer.
You simply must be careful in this department.
Dr. Atmosphere began in a tone not unlike the many other tour guides in the lower floors.
There's plenty of nooks and crannies and vents and vats one could fall into. One must be careful not to hurt themselves. After all, they're all hopeless as it is. Any more so, and even we couldn't use you.
He glanced behind himself maliciously as the three foals frowned in insult. They were walking down a series of hallways with vibrating machines and assembly lines lining the way, occasionally ducking under a low-hanging wire and carefully stepping over steaming pipes. As they walked, though, the building became cooler and cooler. All three were watching, sensing, looking for any way out. They couldn't see any.
Now, let me tell you a story. Cloudsdale is where the weather is made. Without us, the rest of Equestria would starve, freeze, drown, and generally be a not very happy place. That gives us a special honor. One that cannot be tainted by, incompetent foes like you. How could the world look up and trust us if Pegasi like you are flying around wearing the Cloudsdale name? No. We needed to do something with all of you. And then we got a delicious idea one day, over 1,000 years ago. Those were smart ponies back then, I'll say. You don't find too many of them these days. But I digress. Here, now, through these doors. Quickly now, before more encouragement is supplied.
Dr. Atmosphere opened the heavy-looking door in the cramped corridor and offered a hoof inside. Scootaloo stared up at him. He glanced at a suited pony. Scootaloo and the others walked inside as he laughed again.
Enjoy the rest of your pitiful life.
And with that, he slammed the door closed. They all turned and looked at the big room where they had been led to. It was fairly open and empty, almost like a theater room. At one end of the room, there were 6 square vats, each one of them nearly filled with individual spectra. Above them was a particular-looking machine. From the central stack, 6 hoses broke off and led above each of the individual vats. At the top of the stack, there was a single opening, red with rust despite the rest of the machine being shiny and clean. Even further above was a fairly complex-looking object, with chains and gears hanging off the beams and pipes loosely. Running even higher than the whole machine was a length of scaffolding, with doors on either side leading out of the room. Down on the floor, a small collection of defeated crying ponies sat, chatting quietly.
Those suits! There! Those are from that other flight school across town!
Aurora informed, sounding shocked.
And those other ponies, sitting over there, see? I remember a trip we went out once with Levitating Acres Private School. I remember them from that trip.
So, this is where all the failures go. Not deported, but forced to work forever?
Orion sobbed quietly. In exchange for helping someone, he had doomed himself and his good friend for a life of solitude. Scootaloo reached a reassuring wing over and lifted his chin. She smiled at him, understanding his depression.
At least we don't have to go through it alone.
She cooed softly. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the group of ex-students. One pony from an unidentified school took off, headed towards one of the open doors on the scaffolding. Immediately, 2 suited ponies launched up at record speed and both clipped the flyaway with their tasers. The pony spasmed in air and dropped like a stone, with an audible crack as he landed and a violent burst of twitching. All the other ponies walked back, staring horrified at their friend. They watched, hopefully for a long time. He didn't move. Some cried softly. Most others turned away, too far confused to feel any other emotions.
I guess that option's out,
Aurora said to no one in particular.
But you can't fly right now anyways.
That medic guy, Patches, or whatever he was called, he popped my wings back into their joints and bandaged up where my skin tore. I won't be winning any races, but I can fly again.
They slowly walked forwards, and joined the group of ponies, looking at each other with understanding sorrow.
Eyes front and center, you inept mules!
One of the suited ponies shouted. After the previous display, no pony challenged that order and stared at the scaffolding just as one of the doors opened. A few official-looking Pegasi walked onto the scaffolding and turned to look down at the group with disgust. One of them stood on a small podium set up in the center and began speaking loudly and clearly.
By now, you've all clearly determined that you are not going into exile. There is no deportation. There never was. You are in the factory. You will never leave the factory. And while you may be called useless, that's also not entirely true. You're worthless to the flock as a pony, but you still have purpose. Purpose to all the ponies in this land, far and wide. You get to help us make rainbows. Beautiful, magical rainbows. Doesn't that excite you?
The mysterious announcer grinned ecstatically, taking in all the disgusted looks from every foal on the floor below him.
I thought so. It is just such an honor, you know. It leaves every pony entrusted with the task speechless, too. Now, do we have any volunteers?
Every pony below glared with hate. One brave pony, a light pink one from Elevating Acres, walked forward a few steps, then yelled,
How could you ever get away with this? How could Celestia or even Luna know about this and tolerate it? It's slavery. It's torture.
I think you'll find it's more than that.
The second official pony walked out of the shadows and up to the podium. The pony was in a suit and masked. The first pony walked off the podium and allowed the second to talk. Scootaloo noticed that it was the rose-eyed pony from before. She watched more intently now. The voice was familiar.
1,000 years ago, when Celestia banished Luna to the moon, she was charged with 3 tasks. She was originally in charge of just raising the sun and showering the land with rainbows. But with the moon being an additional task, she had to hand down the responsibility of rainbows. Celestia entrusted the Pegasi of Cloudsdale to make rainbows for her, and from then on, and for the first dozen years, we were given powerful unicorns to help create spectra. Spectra is pure pigment, pure color. Everything is full of spectra, but you can't just harvest it. You can never separate color from an object. It has to be artificially made with magic.
The masked pony never took her eyes off of the brave pink one.
That is, until our top engineers made a breakthrough. They discovered an ingenious way of extracting pigment. And it was so beautiful that even a simple machine could do it. But it couldn't be done with just anything. The conditions had to be right.
What did those horrible ponies do?
The pink Pegasus screamed, growing angrier by the minute. The mysterious pony whipped her mask off, unveiling more than her rose eyes. Her skin was a light cyan, and her mane was a gorgeous rainbow. Several of the fillies gasped. Scootaloo's knees weakened as it hit her. It was Rainbow Dash. Scootaloo's thoughts raced through her mind, and the room started spinning. How could it be? An evil twin, maybe? Perhaps some neglected sister. Rainbow Dash couldn't be this evil. She was her friend, her mentor, her only family, even if not by blood. How was all she could think.
It had to be live ponies. Only in ponies, where magic and spectra ran freely together. Only then could the spectra be separated. It was such a beautiful idea. Such a wonderfully horrible idea. And it worked so well. We could create more rainbows, a better quality, enough real spectra. And it finally gave us a way to prevent Cloudsdale from being tainted by all those horrible Pegasi that couldn't fly.
While all the other ponies there exclaimed their disgust and fear, running and screaming from where they came in, backing off as suited ponies around them herded them back into the center of the floor. Scootaloo couldn't take it anymore.
I thought you loved me! Huh?
She turned and noticed the amber-orange Pegasus.
I thought you loved me. How could you do this to me? I thought you cared for me. After all the help, all my life, you've treated me like a little sister. And I've treated you like my big sister. You were my big sister to me. You were the only family I've ever had, and you knew it.
Tears were pouring down her face now, obscuring her vision again. Her throat hurt from crying and shouting, but she couldn't help it.
After everything, you're just going to let me die? I tried so hard for you.
She stared at the floor for a moment. Everyone was silent. Then Scootaloo looked up slowly, and while she couldn't see for the sadness in her eyes, she looked straight at Rainbow Dash, straight into those rosy eyes, past them, and deep into Rainbow Dash herself.
I thought you loved me.
Rainbow Dash returned the look. Her eyes revealed no emotion, no love, no care, only apathy. Slowly, however, they glared at Scootaloo. Pure, seething hatred erupted from Rainbow Dash's mouth as she screamed in return.
I did love you! I tried so hard for you! I taught you everything I knew in hopes that you would pass your test! You had it in you, kid! I knew what they did here! Ever since I performed that sonic rain boom, and they approached me, they thought that if I was capable of making rainbows, that I could help them make its components. Well, they couldn't, and I learned a lot from this place. I'm the manager here, you know? I worked my way up, in secret, pretending to only be simple weather control. How do you think I can afford that massive house over in Ponyville? How do you...
She trailed, shaking her head, remembering her anger suddenly.
I tried! All right? It was up to you to save yourself! You didn't just fail yourself! You didn't just fail Cloudsdale! You failed me! You failed me! And that's the worst thing you could have done! You are just dead to Cloudsdale now! You're dead to me!
The room tilted as Scootaloo tried to comprehend what she was told. Her mind broke. As she was totally unable of focusing on anything, she stumbled slightly until Orion held open a wing, and she clung to it for stability. Rainbow Dash noticed this, and pointed and yelled with more fury.
You can't have happiness. You ruined me! Now I'll ruin you! Workers! The brown one there! Him first! No!
Scootaloo, Aurora, and Orion all jumped. Suited ponies cornered Orion, pushing the other two to the side. He tried to leap out of the way, to run, but one of the stallions spun around and kicked at him. The hoof connected with the shoulder, and Orion collapsed with a shout.
Get back! Get back!
More suits yelled at Aurora and Scootaloo as they dragged a whimpering Orion to the front of the room. The giant machine in the back started humming to life, and the assembly of chains lifted to the top and moved towards the floor. Everyone noticed that they were shackles now, and the suits clasped Orion to them. Braving a look up, he turned to Scootaloo.
Don't worry, Scoots. I love you. Goodbye.
Bye, Orion. I love you too.
With that, the chains pulled tight and lifted the brown Pegasus all the way up to the gears. The chains grew taut and stretched each of Orion's limbs straight up and down.
We find the machine works better when the ribs are broken.
Rainbow Dash explained apathetically as the chains spun around in opposite directions, twisting Orion. His screams almost covered the echoing popping and shattering noises. One or two jagged bones tore through his side, and his yells faded into a slow, quiet rattle of breaths. The chains untwisted, and then the shackles opened, dropping the shattered pony into the single opening. With horror, Scootaloo watched, her brain, overcome with what was happening, detached from all emotion. She noticed that the top of the machine wasn't rusty. It was blood. Blood. Just like what was being tossed up from the mangled remains of Orion, as the rest of his body was swallowed into the great machine, finishing with one lone hoof, directed straight up. And then nothing was left. As the hoses over the green and red vats of Spectrum started spewing their brilliant colors, Scootaloo's vision started to fade, and the last thing she noticed was Aurora's concerned, broken voice calling her name as Scootaloo flopped to the side.
Scootaloo! Get up! Get up! Now, hurry! Scootaloo! Wake up! Wake up!
Scootaloo shook her head, briefly wondering where she was and what was happening. In a flash, it all came back to her, and she jumped to her feet. Aurora was shaking her, fright encasing her face. The suits were starting to approach the two now, tasers and shackles up and ready.
Scootaloo! They're coming for us! What do we do?
Scootaloo looked for an opening. All the doors were blocked except for one. On the scaffolding, the suited ponies were slowly approaching, not rushing in order to prevent the fillies from freaking out. Fear was their tool. Scootaloo spun around, looking for an exit. There was only one.
I have a plan.
What's that?
Clear, fly, fall, complete.
Aurora nodded in understanding, her eyes widening. She repeated louder now, so the other frightened fillies could hear.
Clear, fly, fall, complete. Got it.
1,
2, 3!
A collective shout reverberated around the room as every filly that could actually fly took off. The suited ponies gasped and fell back, unsure of where to go. There was too much confusion. A few of the faster-thinking ones took off as well, tasers at the ready, aiming for the closest Pegasi they could take.
Stop 1! Clear!
With her command, the failures started targeting the dark ponies in droves. And while some of the students fell lifeless to the floor, a majority of casualties were the suited ponies. Scootaloo and Aurora landed on the scaffolding, right by the door, and reached to open it. It was locked.
Oh, God! What do we do now?
We're still unclear!
Scootaloo shouted, turning around and bucking the door. Aurora followed her, focusing the brunt of her blows on the part of the wall where the latch would be.
Kill her!
She screamed at the other important-looking ponies.
Kill her!
She started to gallop towards the fillies, forgetting her wings momentarily. Scootaloo closed her eyes, pounding harder and harder on the door. It started to creak and splinter.
Any second now, Rainbow Dash will get here. It's over. I'm doomed.
She thought she would have cried, but there were no more tears left. Nothing came. The door started to split from its frame, now leaning inward. It wouldn't be long until it opened. She opened her clenched eyes, peeking up at the scaffolding. All the remaining ponies were there, pressing together, holding the enraged blue Pegasus and her cronies back. They wouldn't last long, however. Even as Scootaloo watched, twitching and yelping ponies were falling to the floor below, some even landing in the great maw of the Spectrum machine. The pink pony from Levitating Acres was there, and she turned to Scootaloo and Aurora, just as the door blew back into the hall behind.
Fly!
The pink pony demanded with pain in her voice. She opened her mouth to speak again, but was cut short as the pile of Pegasi blew apart, with Rainbow Dash standing enraged in the open. She was on her 2 back hooves, her front 2 rolling in the air. A small gash down her side leaked red, and her multicolored mane was torn in a patch. An unearthly howl passed her lips, and her rose eyes were drained of any sanity that was left.
Come on, Aurora!
Scootaloo pleaded as she spun around.
We gotta fly if we're gonna live!
I can't. This is too much. I haven't healed.
Aurora looked at Scootaloo with wide open eyes.
You go, Scootaloo. Tell everyone what happens here. Let them know.
She glanced back at the wall of students, almost bare now, as Rainbow Dash's lust tore them to pieces. Her blue coat was now glistening crimson, almost dripping, as she ignored the need for live ponies. There would be more. Cloudsdale could take a shortage of rainbows. In another few months, there would be more classes, more failures. But for now, all she knew is that Scootaloo had to die, violently if possible. Decades of working for the Rainbow Factory had fractured her. She was the only one allowed to be in the public, and keeping the horrible secret with her since childhood had only led to psychological problems that no amount of therapy could cure. Scootaloo was her last link to sanity, and her failure had deleted that. There was no logic in her mind anymore, no care, no capacity for compassion, only hate. Pure, concentrated, evil hatred filled the gap her love for Scootaloo had once occupied. Rainbow Dash was no more. Only this monster remained.
I hardly knew you, Aurora.
Scootaloo cooed softly at the yellow Pegasus beside her.
I'm sorry I never knew you until all of this. And that we had to meet like this, and part like this.
She sniffled. She had found more tears.
Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting.
Aurora reassured Scootaloo.
Now you heard the other pony. Fly, Scootaloo, fly. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
With that, Scootaloo elevated and spun around, looked into the yellow pony's eyes one last time, and launched down the cramped corridor. She had no idea where she was going, but any chance at freedom was one she was willing to take. Aurora blinked a couple times. Standing in front of the door, Rainbow Dash would at least have one obstacle in her way to Scootaloo. The blue pony tossed the last of the students over the scaffolding and slowly walked towards Aurora.
How cute! You think that you, a useless broken pile of manure, could possibly stand in my way? You really make me laugh! None of you could compete with the awesome power that I have!
Love can overcome all evils in this world.
She straightened herself in rebellion as Rainbow Dash stopped in front of her. Aurora stayed in front of Dash, barring her entry down the corridor beyond.
Well then, bitch, let's see if love can overcome this one!
And with that, Rainbow Dash grabbed one of Aurora's bandaged wings and pulled, tearing it off her completely. Aurora collapsed on her knees, grinding her teeth in horrible pain. But she didn't scream. Aurora wouldn't give that to Rainbow Dash. Rainbow grabbed her other wing and dragged her kicking and moaning down the center of the scaffolding. She lifted Aurora up by the wing, laughing quietly to herself as the look of intense agony appeared on Aurora's face. Rainbow Dash took to the air, bringing the squirming yellow and green pony with her, over top of the machine. With a squeak of laughter, she jerked at the wing in her hoof. It too disconnected from the convulsing Pegasus, and Aurora fell. She landed head first. The door on the scaffolding closed with a gust of wind, just as the machine began pumping out the brightest greens and yellows it had ever produced. There was no one around to see it. Scootaloo glanced backwards momentarily, her heart pounding. The noise of the constant beating drowned out any other sound in her head, her ears throbbing along with it. The corridor was just like the one that led to the theater room, cramped, with dozens of obstacles jutting out at different intervals. Straight behind her, maybe 500 meters now, the bloody mare that used to be Rainbow Dash was cruising along herself. Both Pegasi were completely straight, hooves forward, wings beating at an impossible count, one trying to escape, the other to capture. Scootaloo looked forward again, focusing on what lied ahead of her.
That's all that matters. What's ahead of me?
She thought.
There's no changing what's behind me. Ignore it. Focus.
For the second time in many days, the flood of instinct overtook Scootaloo, and despite the terror she felt in her body, the sorrow that had surrounded her, and the evil behind her, her worries melted away, and the thought of flying encased her very being. Down under wires and pipes she ducked, up and around various workers whose complaints and shouts were ignored, only to be repeated momentarily as the raging pony behind collided with them. Her body doing the flying, Scootaloo's thoughts turned to escape opportunities. She whipped around sharp corners at impossible speeds, zipped up and down countless flights of stairs, trying to shake her murderous tail, but to no avail. She contemplated every nook and cranny she passed, briefly considering hiding. She struck that idea down. As insane as Rainbow may be, she was still too smart to overlook any possible spot Scootaloo may be. But there, ahead of her, Scootaloo thought of a solution. A garbage vent of some kind, sticking out from the wall, down to the floor below. Momentarily, she gave thought to where it may lead. Whether out of the factory, or into some kind of incinerator, she couldn't tell, but it was probably worth the risk. She snuck one last glance to make sure the unstable mare was far away enough. Rainbow Dash was paying no attention to any hazard as she sought her prey, tearing through electrical wires and ricocheting off heated pipes, going through any obstacle rather than around it to save time, but the collisions had slowed her down enough to give Scootaloo a chance. She slammed to a sudden halt over a vent, hoping for her life. "Oh," she muttered, closing her eyes and wings, resisting the urge to start flapping immediately. She counted silently to herself as shadows passed her closed eyes, hoping for the best to where the vent led. 1, 2, 3. She opened her eyes and her wings and looked up, hovering. Rainbow Dash was up above, looking down into the vent. Her eyes were buggy and twitched. Her hooves pounded at the edge of the vent. She was too large to follow, the filly having barely made it to herself. But then, the anger in her face vanished, only to be replaced by a malicious grin. She started laughing again, the cackle echoing down the vent and reverberating in Scootaloo's mind.
Oh, you moron! You never did have a good sense of direction!
Scootaloo finally looked down, getting her bearings.
Oh, no!
She was in the theater room again, only by now it was filled with suited ponies, circling her. Their masks' face seemed to be grinning at her as Rainbow Dash shouted orders down the vent.
Don't let her die! Just subdue her! I want to do it! It has to be me!
She whinnied in glorious victory as the suits shocked Scootaloo with a taser, and as her limp body began to fall from the air, caught her and brought her to the floor. Scootaloo blacked out momentarily as the electricity passed through her, but came to lying on the cold cloud floor, metal shackles preventing her from moving. She struggled to get free. She could hardly shake. The chains lifted her slightly, bringing her small body eye to eye with the Pegasus in front of her. The pony was deep blood red, glistening in the artificial light of the factory. Her mane had small spots of glorious colors of the rainbow, but it was mostly the same red color of her coat of fur. Chunks of skin were missing from small spots, and her hair was ripped in some places, bald patches of skin in others. The only clue Scootaloo had as to who this used to be where those rose irises focused on her.
Any final words, you miserable, worthless, horrible fool?
Scootaloo brought her chin high, still demanding even the tiniest fraction of dignity.
You have beautiful eyes.
Sweeping can be fun too. Sweep, 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 sweep. Sweep, 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 sweep. Only Twilight
Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping. I mean, how lame is that?
Yeah, it wasn't even catchy.
Nope.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping.
Sweep, 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 sweep.
Only Twilight could make a dance remix about sweeping.
Sweep, 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 sweep,